I'd like to share with you some of the books that I have in my library. Usually, when I purchase a book, I read it, the book that I like, and I usually give it away. But then there are certain books, what you see in my library, which is about 100, 150 or 200 page books, that are important to me, that I like to keep them until the last day of my life. So I'm going to introduce to you some of these books. The first book that you see here is called The Dawnbreakers. This is the history, the early history of the Baha'i faith, which was written by Nabil, an early Baha'i, and then was translated meticulously by Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the faith. This is a must-read for every Baha'i. The next book that I have used so many different times is this book called The Light of Guidance. And this is a complete reference book to all the different kinds of questions that the Baha'i may have on medical questions and the Baha'i faith, on the question of the institution of the faith, of holy days, of the question of the right of God that we call Baha'u'llah, and every question that has come up in the faith, the question of alcohol, the question of covenant and covenant breakers, every single question is explained in detail. All the original writings of Baha'u'llah, then interpretations by Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi and other clarifications by Universal Justice. This next book that I want to show you is called The Promulgation of Universal Peace. And this is a collection of Abdu'l-Baha's talks in the US in particular, and it deals with so many different subjects. You know, Abdu'l-Baha spoke at universities, in churches, and in so many different places. And so this is a collection of those talks, and for any Baha'i, particularly who wants to teach the Baha'i faith and who wants to be familiar with all the major tenets of the faith, this is such a concise and wonderful book. My other book in this collection is this one, Baha'u'llah, the King of Glory, by Hassan Balyuzi. Hassan Balyuzi was a descendant of the Baha. He was also a hand of the cause, chosen by Shoghi Effendi, and he was an amazing scholar. He lived in England, and during his lifetime he wrote extensively about the life of the Bab, Baha'u'llah, and Abdu'l-Baha. And so this one is about Baha'u'llah, and in which you see wonderful photographs of all the actors involved in this time period. From Nasser ibn Shah and his ministers to Abdul Majid and then Abdul Hamid, the sultans of Turkey, of Ottoman Empire at the time, and the ministers, and many of the people who were martyred or who were famous in helping Baha'u'llah, spreading the cause of Baha'u'llah. So this is an amazing collection and a wonderful book to read and to have. The other two books that I have here are called The Covenant and The Child of Covenant. It is a chronicle of the history of covenant in the Baha'i faith from the time of Baha'u'llah, then the time of Abdu'l-Baha, and the time of Shoghi Effendi, and up to the time of Universal Justice. The contemporary scholar who passed away a few years ago, Adib Taherzadeh, he has written these two extensive, wonderful books. Again, for me, this is a book to have and refer to all the time. This book, this beautiful book, called Call to Remembrance, is a collection of writings and an excerpt from the history of the faith, which came out in 1992, the year of centennial of the passing away of Baha'u'llah, when we had a conference, a huge conference in New York, and in celebration of that, this book came out. This other book, selections from the writings of E.G. Brown, Edward Brown, with regard to Babi and Baha'i religions, is a collection edited by the Iranian British scholar Mujan Momen, and it's a fascinating story collection of Brown's writing with regard to the Babi Baha'i faith. And the other book that most friends are familiar with is God Passes By. Now, Nabi's narrative was a history of the faith, but this is also history. But this is written by Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the faith, and it's really an analysis of history of the faith and the station of the Bab, station of Baha'u'llah, and up through the administrative order and how the Baha'i administrative order was put into place. This is written in an amazing language and such a wonderful book to have and to read several times. Of course, a Baha'i should have the other holy writings. This is the Holy Bible that I often refer to, and particularly the New Testament. I love to read part of it. The other book here in this collection is Epistle to the Son of the Wolf. This, we know, is the Muslim clergy who did a lot of atrocities against the Babis and then Baha'is, the early Baha'is. And of course, this is in response to a lot of questions that a lot of mullahs and Muslim priests had. But then in addition to that, this is really an explanation of a lot of teachings of Baha'u'llah. This is one of the last writings of Baha'u'llah, which was revealed in Accra. And of course, this is a wonderful collection to have and to refer to many times and to read several times. Our friend, Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the U.S., Kenneth Bowers, has written this beautiful book, God Speaks Again, a fascinating collection with regard to both history and teachings and the laws and the administrative order by faith, and a fascinating clarification of many issues that is again another wonderful book to have and to read and reflect upon. Of course, this is Kitab al-Aqdas, Baha'is most holy book, and we all know that this book, probably about 120 pages of it, is the book itself, and then many questions that Baha'is had at the time, and asked Baha'u'llah, and Baha'u'llah explained, clarified many of the questions. And of course, this is considered the most holy book of Baha'is, and we all need to have it and to read it and to understand what the laws of the Baha'i faith are. Okay, I have a couple other books here on this row. The Promise of World Peace is what came out in 1980s by the Universal Justice, which explains the mission of Baha'u'llah and the vision of the Baha'i faith in a very concise language, a beautiful writing, and this is a beautiful edition of it, which is nice to have and nice to give to the friends who are investigating the Baha'i faith. This other small book, One Common Faith, came out a few years ago by Universal Justice and explains the vision of the Baha'i faith in terms of the fact that all religions need to eventually come together in order to bring peace and prosperity to the humankind. The other book that I want to share with you is that I have in my library is this one by Ali Naqshbandi, a previous member of the Universal Justice, Toward a New World Order. That's a beautiful and collection of writings in the form of questions and answers. Many questions that people asked Mr. Naqshbandi, and he tried to respond, in effect, as to where we are with regard to the world order of Baha'u'llah, where we're going, what would be the future like, and so based on his understanding of the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha, and Shaykh Effendi tries to explain it and quotes many of the holy writings. I found this a concise and wonderful book to have. This book is among the writings of Shaykh Effendi, Advent of Divine Justice. In many of Shaykh Effendi's writings, he explains the Baha'u'llah's vision and his vision of the future, the turmoil of the present, and our position as Baha'is in it, as to where we are and how we should play a role in bringing that future peace and prosperity to the humankind. Another book that I will always have in my library is The Priceless Pearl, a beautiful book written by Ruya Khanum, the wife of Shaykh Effendi, who wrote basically his understanding of who Shaykh Effendi was. This Shaykh Effendi with his aunt, the greatest holy leaf, and shows the struggle and the life of Shaykh Effendi until he passed away when he was only 60 years old in 1957. Another book in this collection is this one called Release the Sun. This is a concise version of Nabi's narrative, written by William Sears, Hand of the Cause. A beautiful book, concise, and also written in very simple language, in a very concise format. The other book that I enjoyed reading and having in my library is this one called Wellspring of Guidance, and this is many of the pronouncements by the Universal Justice. This book, Zikrullah Khadem, who was one of the Hands of the Cause at the time of Shaykh Effendi, and he passed away in the 1980s. This is a number of recollections by his wife and by his sons and daughter. So a beautiful writing and beautiful reflection of who this fascinating man was. This is called the Will and Testament of Abdu'l-Baha, the small book, but this we consider it a charter of the New World Order, as Shaykh Effendi calls it. Explains the position of the Guardian and the Universal Justice, and this is something for all the Baha'is to have and to read and reflect about. This small book, The Proclamation of Baha'u'llah, is the collection of all Baha'u'llah's writings, tablets, to kings and rulers and of the world, and we can see all the tablets to Queen Victoria and to Napoleon III of France and Nicholas of Russia and to Nasser al-Din Shah of Iran, to Abdul-Majid of Ottoman Empire, and so on. A fascinating collection for all of us to read and reflect upon. Peter Smith put together this concise encyclopedia of the Baha'i faith. So he he has collected this, and so with regard to many questions, with regard to who is who in effect in the Baha'i faith, based in terms of individuals and in terms of the expansion of the Baha'i faith, the places where Baha'is were and are, and the so many different questions in a very concise manner. Another book to have and reflect upon. This book, again, this is the hard copy. I like to have many of the holy writings in the hard copy format, so that when we use it several times, it can remain. Some answer questions, of course, of the so many questions which was raised by the by Clifford Barney, an early Baha'i at the time of Abdu'l-Baha, who went to Akka and Haifa and had several questions to ask Abdu'l-Baha. So many questions, hundreds of questions, and it was collected in this format, in the form of this book, Some Answer Questions. I have enjoyed reading this book several times. A Love Which Does Not Wait. This is the collection of the 9 fascinating women, Lua Getzinger and Martha Root and Clara Dan and a number of other early Baha'is. The Keith Ransom Keller, who went to Iran, Dorothy Baker, who was the hand of the cause whose airplane fell and she died when coming back to US from the conference in Delhi. The airplane fled in Mediterranean Sea, and so many others. This is a fascinating book, beautifully written, and something to have and cherish. Another book that I have is Mirza Abul Fazl Essays. So as you know, Mirza Abul Fazl was one of the early scholars of the faith who became a Baha'i during the time of Baha'u'llah, and she served Abdu'l-Baha for so many years until he passed away, and he is buried in today's Egypt. Of course, I also carry a copy of the Holy Quran that I refer to and read and reflect upon some of the passages. And this book is the selections from the writings of the Bab. Writings of the Bab are so beautiful, and this collection particularly is something to enjoy, to have. Now, this collection called Memories of Abdu'l-Baha are a series of writings and reflections from the time period that Abdu'l-Baha was in US, and many Baha'is who came in contact with him had certain reflections, and this is the summary of those reflections. This book, the Tahireh, the Pure, is written by Martha Root, and so this was one of the early attempts in collecting the writings of Martha Root, by Martha Root, of Tahireh, and she has included a number of poems of Tahireh in Persian as well in this collection. I find this book very fascinating, called the Mystery of God, and this, of course, with regard to Abdu'l-Baha. I've never seen so many beautiful photos of Abdu'l-Baha in one collection. So there are some writings starting with the Book of Covenant, the Will and Testament of Baha'u'llah, and then so many photographs, beautiful photographs of Abdu'l-Baha are in this book, just page after page after page, from Abdu'l-Baha's youth to when he became an old man, such as this one, and with so many different friends in different areas. A beautiful reading, a beautiful collection of books. The other book that I have is a brief history of the faith, early history of the faith, called A Traveler's Narrative, written by Abdu'l-Baha himself, and translated by none other than Edward Brown. So again, this is a very, very short, brief history, but beautiful reading, and wonderful reading to have. Before the Kitab al-Abbas, the Most Holy Book, was translated completely, we had what's called a synopsis and codification of the laws of Kitab al-Aqdas. So this is again a very short, concise understanding of Kitab al-Aqdas that many Baha'is like to have and refer to. I was sharing with you some of the books that I have in my library and the books that I want to keep until the day I die. The other book that I have is called The Right of God, Baha'u'llah. This is a small book which is extracts from the writings of Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, Shulgi Effendi, and Universal Justice on what this question is. This is a very small book, but a detailed book in terms of understanding this very important question. The other book, which I really love, is called In Search of Certitude. This is for deepening our understanding and strengthening our faith in this wonderful faith. And this is primarily from the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha on the question of certitude in the faith. Another collection, which is called The Sufferings of Baha'u'llah, is a collection of Baha'u'llah's writings on why he suffered and to save humanity from disaster. You may know that Violet Nahjawani was the secretary of Ruhi Khanum, the wife of Shulgi Effendi, for many years, and she wrote this book, a tribute to Ruhi Khanum, a wonderful read. Among the writings of Baha'u'llah, one of the books that stands out, according to Shulgi Effendi, as one of the outstanding books is the Kitab-i-Ghan, the Book of Certitude. A small book, less than 200 pages, but something for all the Baha'is to have, and anyone who's in search of truth should have and reflect upon. William Hatcher, a renowned Baha'i scholar, has collected this book, The Science and Religion, a small book on discussing the issue of harmony and science and religion from the Baha'i perspective. Mojan Momen, the British scholar, has written several books, including this one, Hinduism and the Baha'i Faith. There are millions and millions of Hindus in the world, and for us to be able to talk to them, we should at least have an understanding, a general understanding of who they are and then the connection of their faith to our beloved faith. One of the renowned scholars who became Baha'i during the time of Abdu'l-Baha was August Forel. And this book, called For the Good of Mankind, is the story of August Forel and the tablet that he wrote to Abdu'l-Baha and the responses that he received, and some of the reflections with regard to this fascinating man. I find this book, Baha'u'llah, the selected writings of Baha'u'llah, beautiful book, concise book, contained many tablets in a short format, particularly suitable for feasts and holy days. It's a wonderful book to have. This series of books from the writings of our faith are published in this format, which means paperback, and is a wonderful collection to have. Of course, the hidden words of Baha'u'llah. Every Baha'i has it. This is half of it originally is in Arabic and the other half in Persian. Of course, this is all in English. Short passages from Baha'u'llah. The other book, The Seven Valleys and Four Valleys, are really two tablets, which is collected in this one small book. This is prayers and meditations from the writings of Baha'u'llah. The Secret of Divine Civilization is what was originally written to the people of Iran by Abdu'l-Baha during the time of Baha'u'llah, and is still relevant today with regards to some of the challenges, some of the issues that people of Iran face, and in fact people of the world face. Also, I told you already about Some Answered Questions, but this is the paperback copy of Some Answered Questions by Abdu'l-Baha. This is a selected writings of Abdu'l-Baha, the tablets that he wrote to so many different individuals and in general as well. Now, gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah are a collection of hundreds of passages, hundreds of writings of Baha'u'llah in this concise book. Also from the writings of Baha'u'llah, this is the tablets of Baha'u'llah, Tarazat, Tablet of Dunya, the world, and many other Ishraqat, and many other tablets. These are specific tablets of Baha'u'llah collected in this book. This is also additional tablets of Baha'u'llah, which was translated not too long ago under the summons of the Lord of the Host. From the writings of Shoghi Effendi, one is called The Promised Day Is Come, Shoghi Effendi's analysis of the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha, the current situation of the world, and his future perspective. Then after that book, what he issued was The World Order of Baha'u'llah, which was also written by Shoghi Effendi, particularly to the Baha'is of US at the time. I'm sharing with you some of the books that I have in my library, and these are the books that I want to keep until the last day of my life. I always refer to them. Many times I go back and read them again and learn a lot from them. This book, Citadel of Faith, is the collection of Shoghi Effendi's messages to the Baha'is of US from 1947 to 1957, when he passed away. There are a series of 4 books: Revelation of Baha'u'llah, Volume 1, Revelation of Baha'u'llah, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4. These 4 fascinating books, written by Adib Taherzadeh, the famous scholar of the faith, is about all the writings of Baha'u'llah from the very beginning to the very end of his life. So he explains the situation, the condition under which those tablets were revealed in Iraq, and then from there in Adrianople, in today's Turkey, and then to Akka until the last day of Baha'u'llah's life. So these are the fascinating 4 books to have and to read and to reflect upon. Memorial of the Faithful is a collection of writing about individuals such as Tahirih and Qudus and Mullah Hussein and others, written by Abdu'l-Baha himself. So this is a historical perspective of the early believers of the faith by Abdu'l-Baha. This small book, Khadija Khanum, the wife of the Bab, is a recollection of who the wife of the Bab was and her life story. This small book, Khanum, the Greatest Holy Leaf, is about, of course, the Great Holy Leaf, the sister of Abdu'l-Baha, who was in charge of running the affairs of the Baha'i faith between the passing of Abdu'l-Baha and when Shoghi Effendi came back to Haifa to take over the affairs of the faith. This beautiful book, Portals to Freedom. I don't see this recently in Baha'i bookstores, but if you can find it, this is the book written by what's his name? By Howard Colby Ives, a Christian minister who became a Baha'i during the time of Abdu'l-Baha, and it tells his story as to how he came into contact with Abdu'l-Baha and how he became a believer, and it makes you cry. It is so gentle and so beautifully written. Baha'i World Faith is a collection of the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha. Many of the tablets are in this collection. Turning Point is the summary of the pronouncements of universal justice from 1996 to 2006. The Century of Light, written by or approved by the Universal House of Justice, is a fascinating story of the 20th century, and then our role as Baha'is in it. Another wonderful book to have is Baha'u'llah's teachings on a spiritual reality. And then a companion to that would be the proofs of Baha'u'llah's mission. These are the two books that are very helpful in our deepening in the Baha'i faith. Baha'u'llah and the New Era, written by Dr. Esselman toward the end of Abdu'l-Baha's life and during the early years of Shoghi Effendi's ministry, is written by Dr. Esselman, who was an early believer, and he resided in Haifa for a while, and this is a collection of his understanding of the writings of the faith, and the teachings of the faith, and the laws of the Baha'i faith, and the history of the faith, still relevant for giving it to a true seeker of the Baha'i faith. A very brief version of it is this one, The Baha'i Faith, written by Gloria Feyzi. A beautiful book with regard to the essentials of the Baha'i faith. The other book, written by another handed cause, William Sears, is this classic, Thief in the Night, for a Christian seeker as to how he or she can find Baha'u'llah from William Sears' perspective. This is an early compilation on Baha'i administration, as to how the Baha'i administration works with regard on a local level, national level, and international level, and so this is a fascinating book to have. Hassan Balyuzi, I already told you about him. He was a scholar of the faith who resided in England, who was a relative of the Baha, and who became a hand of the cause during the ministry of Shoghi Effendi. And this concise book about life of the Bab is a wonderful read, and gives us a deeper perspective of the station of the Bab. Christ and Baha'u'llah is a book written by George Townsend. George Townsend was the Archbishop of Canterbury, the very high position among Christians in Ireland, who became Baha'i, and he declared during the life of Shoghi Effendi. And in the 1950s he became a hand of the cause, and before he passed away a few months after Shoghi Effendi passed away, he wrote this book, and the book was actually ready for publication right around the time when he passed away. This small book, Eternal Voice, is a summary of the essentials of all the religions, and how all the religions have there's the same basic message with regard to the spiritual truths of all religions. A wonderful book to have, a wonderful book to share in firesides and in deepenings. On the question of consultation, which is so important in the Baha'i faith, we have this collection which is called Spiritual Assemblies and Baha'i Consultation. Because one of our essential teachings being oneness of the humankind, in order to bring it about, we have to stop bickering and fighting among each other, and understand what the essential elements of consultation is. This book, written by Mr. Nash, Iran's Secret Program, was published in mid-1980s, and reveals in detail the documents which came out from the government of Iran in their program to try, in their own thinking, to persecute and eliminate the Baha'i faith from Iran. And then a complement to that came out a few years afterwards, called the Baha'i Question, the cultural cleansing in Iran of the Baha'is. and this chronicles in detail every single Baha'i who was put to jail and who was executed by the Islamic government of Iran, and all the documentation and all the pronouncement of the United Nations condemning those actions. I have a number of non-Baha'i books that I always refer to and enjoy reading. Among them is this one by Dalai Lama, Essential Wisdom. Always see how close those teachings of love and unity is in different religions. I also love to read some of the writings of Karen Armstrong, the Catholic nun who became interested in reading and understanding the teachings of different religions, and she has studied Buddhism and Islam in particular, and has written this beautiful book about Buddha. And Karen Armstrong has also written another beautiful book called Islam, about the Prophet Muhammad and the teachings of Islam. Another good reading for all of us to have. A wonderful contemporary of mine, Linda Kavalin Popov, came up with this fascinating book, Sacred Moments. And in this book, Linda explains how the teachings and the writings in different religions come together. And so she tried to promote this book in different countries of the world, and she has promoted them to be taught in different schools. I have another book by Karen Armstrong that I enjoy reading, Holy Wars, and she goes back to the Crusades and how this Crusades was really something, a black eye for the Christian world, for what they did and the massacres which occurred in the Middle East for some 200 years. There's another book of Karen Armstrong that I don't have here right now. It's called The Battle for God, in which she explains the atrocities by fundamentalists in all religions. This book is a short book, Abdu'l-Baha in London. This is during the time between 1910 to 1912 that Abdu'l-Baha traveled to the West, and he stayed in London and he gave several talks in several places. So that's that collection that I've enjoyed having and reading. Then Abdu'l-Baha's talks in Paris, a lot of them dealing with science and religion, and many concepts dealing with religious and scientific issues that he talked about. And that's another book that I want to have forever. This book, Dispensation of Baha'u'llah, is a concise book from the writings of Shoghi Effendi. There's a small book that I enjoyed reading by an early Baha'i, Stanwood Cobb, who visited Abdu'l-Baha, and he passed away, I believe, in 1980s, early 1980s. And the book is called Islamic Contributions to Civilizations. And so this is the write-up of a Baha'i talking about the contribution of Islam to civilization, particularly in the first 5 centuries of Islam. Another book by Shoghi Effendi, Call to the Nations, discusses the current situation of the world and the call of Baha'u'llah to oneness of the humankind. A collection of writings called Processes of the Lesser Peace is the collection of writings from a conference by the university graduates and published a few years ago. That's a collection of writings on different issues dealing with peace, and when we get to what is called in the Baha'i faith the lesser peace. 2 volumes from the collection of the writings of Baha'u'llah. One is called the Gems of Divine Mystery, is from the early writings of Baha'u'llah in 1850s, that is translated and published by the Universalist Justice. Another collection from the writings of Baha'u'llah also from the period of 1850s, 1860s, is called The Tabernacle of Unity. Includes particularly a tablet called Response to Manichi Sahib, one of the early Zoroastrians at the time, who had asked Baha'u'llah a number of questions, and Baha'u'llah responded to him. I guess these are perhaps the most important books in my first series of discussion that I wanted to have with regard to my friends to consider purchasing some of these books for their library. In the next session, I'll share with you a few other books. Thank you for your attention. I'm discussing some of the books that I cherish and I like to keep for as long as I live. Among these books is Rawayat Omar Khayyam. A lot of these collections are written both in Persian and in English, and for those who know both languages, it's good to have the collection in both languages. Another book from the translations of the writings of Rumi that I like is this one edited by Deepak Chopra, called The Love Poems of Rumi. This is a beautiful collection of poems, and as far as I'm concerned, this is perhaps the best translation from the writings of Rumi that I cherish and I love to have. From the several books written by Deepak Chopra, I particularly enjoyed reading the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. And in effect, that relates to all religions as to what we can do in terms of meditation and prayers and harmony of thought in order to become harmonious with ourselves and with the world. A book written by an American professor, I believe he was from the University of Chicago, Alan Bloom, is called The Closing of the American Mind. This book was written several years ago, maybe 20 years ago or more, but it's a remarkable book, and he has so many insights into the psyche of the American of the time, and what needs to be done in institutions of higher learning in particular to change the mindset for the better. Another book written by Karen Armstrong that I told you that I like many of his writings is called The History of God. And this book was written several years ago, basically how the thought of God came to human mind, and through time how we have evolved through this concept of what God is. A short book on Confucius. So many people think of him as a philosopher, as a prophet, or somewhere between a philosopher or prophet of the East, and it's enjoyable to read some of his perceptions of life. I have told you that among the poets of the East, I particularly love Rumi, and this Essential of Rumi is written by one of the experts of Rumi, Coleman Barks. Another book on Rumi is basically, this is a thesis written by Afzal Iqbal on Rumi quite a few years ago, which gives a history of the time, and together with that, some of the poems that Rumi has revealed. This was called the Essentials of Sufism, and it includes many of the writings of Sufism, including some of the poems of Rumi. Quite a fascinating read. Another, perhaps even better book on Sufism is called The Key Concepts to Sufism by Gulan, a Turkish writer. That's a wonderful book in terms of what he thinks are the essentials of mysticism and Sufism, which applies really to all the mystics of the world. This book, written by Ladinsky, The Gift by Hafez, is a wonderful book. Of course, this is his understanding of what Hafez has said. I don't think Ladinsky knows Persian, but apparently someone has translated the writings of Hafez for him, and he has been able to sort of translate it into English. A beautiful writing of his understanding of who Hafez was, the Persian poet of 14th, 15th century. Among the writings of Khalil Gibran, the poet-philosopher of Lebanon, this book, The Prophet, is the most famous. And so many of his writings regarding death and marriage and love and life and so on is still relevant in many of our thoughts and thinking. A book written many years ago by Wilson, apparently he was a minister, but he was disenchanted with many Christians, in effect, and basically the situation of the world, and he wrote this book called God's Funeral. There are many things in this respect in terms of religion and God and the way humanity is dealing with these questions. It's a good read. Another book by Karen Armstrong is called Battle for God. He basically deals with the question of fanaticism in all religions. And this was written shortly before September 11, 2001. And many of her thoughts with regard to the question of fanaticism and prejudice and superstitions that creates this battle among these different religions is quite relevant today. Well, we all know that Richard Dawkins is an atheist, and he wrote this book, The God Delusion. So I do not necessarily read the books that I agree with. I also read some of the books in order to understand what the perception of other people are with regard to the question of God. As far as Baha'is are concerned, we do not really know, cannot understand the nature of God. What we understand from God and godliness is love and kindness to others. This book, written after World War II, A Moral History of the 20th Century, Humanity, by Jonathan Glover, is quite an eye-opener, in many ways a sad document with regard to where humanity has gone, but quite an important read for anyone who is concerned about the plight of humanity. I also, anyone who is interested in the situation of the world, condition of the world, should be interested in philosophy and history. And among the books that I've enjoyed reading is this book, The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, by Edward Gibbon, one of the famous historians. So this is a famous book to have in the library and read. This book, The Machine That Changed the World, is a classic with regard to the question of lean production and global competition, particularly in auto industry. This book, written by David Fromkin, A Peace That Ended All Peace, is a chronicle of World War I and the atrocities that contributed to the slaughter of close to 20 million people, many of them civilian and non-soldiers, and how in some battles hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and how 20th century was the beginning of devastation in terms of warfare because of modernization and industrial development. Another read with regard to war in the 20th century is this book by Kantowitz called The Rage of Nations, which also discusses the history of warfare in the 20th century and how bloody and dangerous it has become. Now, Francis Fukuyama is a famous writer and historian and philosopher, perhaps, who taught at Harvard University, and he has composed this book, The End of History and the Last Man, in which he thinks that the Western civilization, the Western democracy has won, and basically that's the end and the beginning. But there are many truth in it, but there are also many things that we have to reflect on and improve upon with regard to his thesis. The famous historian, Middle Eastern historian, Bernard Lewis, has authored several books, including this book, The Middle East. It's a concise book with regard to the history of the Middle East, the challenges in the Middle East, which is also an important book to have and reflect upon. The book by Samuel Huntington, I believe another professor from Harvard University, called The Clash of Civilizations, also refers to the conflicts between the East and the West, and how the West has in effect won, is his perception. Again, many truths, but many things to reflect upon and think about. Now, for many of us who don't have the time or even maybe the interest to read and study all different religions, perhaps this small book would be a big help, by Robert Pollack, called Everything World's Religion Book. It's quite concise and interesting read with regard to all the different religions of the world. Those of us interested in Middle East, particularly Iran, there are so many books written about Iran, but one of the books that I kept it's called by Sandra McKee, called The Iranians, Persia, Islam, and the Soul of a Nation. Basically, it goes back from the early history of Iran up through the revolution and the changes that have occurred in the past 2,000 years, particularly the past 70, 80 years after fall of the Qajar dynasty and beginning of Pahlavi regime, and then up through the Islamic regime. Good read. One of the books from my undergraduate program that I still keep is this was the second history course that I took, called The History of Western Civilization. This one by Burns, Lerner, and others. I never forget when I opened this book in my undergraduate course, and it opened with this passage. On the night before Saint Bartholomew's Day, in August of 1572, the Catholic Queen Mother of France, Catherine Medici, authorized the ambush of French Protestant leaders who happened to be in Paris to attend the wedding. And then he goes on to say that thousands were massacred, and so this was in effect the beginning of the slaughter of Catholics by Protestants and Protestants by Catholics. Just an amazing part of history as to how a religion of love ended up with so much hatred and animosity and the slaughter of human beings. Another book from my undergraduate classes that I keep is called Voices of Wisdom, from Socrates and Plato and Aristotle to some of the philosophers of the current time, their perception of life after death, the purpose of life, the meaning of life, and so on and so forth. It gives you a good grounding of the basic tenets of how to live and what the purpose of life is. I also enjoyed the American history book from the beginning of U.S. history, in the beginning of this country as a nation, in 1700s and up through of our current time. So I always love to have my history book of the American history and refer to it. And anyone who is interested in history and the presidents of this country should have at least one book about Lincoln, perhaps the most famous and the most important U.S. president, and his life story and how he struggles with regard to bringing to this country racial harmony and unity between East and the South and the North, and the fights and the struggle of the time, the Civil War, and all of that period. And his talks and his lectures would stay with us forever. So I always like to keep this book and refer to it. Now, today's world, we are so interrelated, and this book is also another, I think, a graduate book. One of the books that I kept is called Taking Sides, Global Issues. And, whether on the question of economics or health issues or oceanics or environment, and you name it. There are so many issues which have global implications. All of us need to be aware of it. And particularly for me, it was also my interest in terms of understanding these global issues and seeing how we can deal with it. Another book, I don't necessarily agree with all of her thesis. Norina Hertz came up with this book, The Silent Takeover. And she talks about the fact that multinational corporations have taken over, basically, and they will be the ones who would rule the world. And she talks perhaps about the negative consequences of this global takeover of multinational firms. Many things that we can learn from those lessons. Thomas Friedman, the famous editor of New York Times, came up with this book several years ago, The World is Flat, and talks about the fact that how we are economically and otherwise related globally and connected to one another. I'd like to share with you a few other books. This is a classic by George Orwell, 1984. Again, it shows the extremes of possibilities of how technologies and techniques and dictatorship, even though it may be called a democracy, could take over the world. And so although the book is very negative, but there are many things that we can learn from it. And in conjunction with that, another book by George Orwell, also negative, but a lot of lessons in it, is this Animal Farm that many of you are familiar with. A philosopher that I've recently read more about him is Jacob Needleman from University of San Francisco. Came up with this book, A Sense of the Cosmos. And he's interested in the basic questions of why we are here on this earth. What is the purpose of life? How do philosophers deal with it? And so on and so forth. Another classic philosophy book is Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche. Again, gives us some contrasts of again the basic philosophical questions that we need to deal with. Stephen Carter came with an interesting book called Integrity. What does integrity mean? And where do I stand with regard to this question of honesty and integrity? A fascinating book to reflect upon and to think about and to read. Everyone is familiar with Plato's Republic. What would be the utopia? What kind of a world or what kind of a country we want to have, and what would be the ideal situation? Again, just a wonderful book to read. I think a lot of the questions that he has raised over 2,000 years ago still apply. Francis Fukuyama, I told you about him already, came up with this very good book, interesting book, on the question of trust. What does it mean, and how that is the basis of the progress of the humankind, and countries and people who are more trustworthy, those cities and those states and those nations are the ones that eventually would advance more, because they have this question of trust and honesty integrated in the life and lifestyle. Another of the writings of this contemporary philosopher, Jacob Needleman, is this book called The Heart of Philosophy, where he goes and basically discusses some of the issues of philosophy and how he approached in his classes dealing with these basic questions in life. Anyone who is interested in philosophy but does not want to necessarily major in philosophy can probably read this book, A History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell. And perhaps one of the books in philosophy that I've enjoyed the most is this book by Will Durant, The Story of Philosophy. In this book he starts with Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and comes all the way to the contemporary philosophers of particularly the Age of Enlightenment, Voltaire and others in 18th century, and then the philosophers in the 19th century and up to the early 20th century, Bertrand Russell and others. I enjoyed this book very much and have read it several times. Although I don't read just books which are not either religion or history or philosophy, but one of the books that I enjoy reading by an Iranian professor, Azar Nafisi, is reading Lolita in Tehran. This was after the Islamic Revolution had taken over, and there were so much limitations for students and professors, and she held classes for her students at her home before she escaped Iran or left Iran and came to the US. A fascinating read. A few days ago I recorded a few segments dealing with the books that I like and I'd like to keep for the rest of my life. Today I'm going to tell you about the books that I do not like, or I did not like, based on my experience. I was an accounting professor for 30 years, and I retired a few years ago, and before I retired I tried to clean up my office, and this is what I wrote. Today I decided to clean up my office and get myself organized and my mind uncluttered. So I threw away 99 accounting reviews. This is a famous accounting journal in which professors try to publish articles in it. I was never able to publish anything in it. It's very difficult to get something published in it, and as far as I'm concerned, it's very unreadable. Very few people, if any, read those articles. So I threw away all the accounting reviews that I had. 49 cost accounting textbooks. I taught primarily cost accounting, and the cost accounting books are anywhere between 500 to 1,000 pages. A lot of people are involved in developing those books. The professors who write the book and a lot of professors who edit it, and then the publishers who publish it. So it becomes very costly. Anywhere between $100 to $120 to $200 is the price of one textbook. As far as I'm concerned, the 1,000-page book could be condensed into 100 pages, but that doesn't really suit the universities or the professors or the publishing companies. So I threw away all of those cost accounting books. 39 accounting systems book, also taught accounting systems, how to computerize an accounting system, and those books are also 500-600 pages, quite cumbersome for the students and for the faculty. 7 books on management. Management, as far as I'm concerned, can be best taught by somebody who has practiced management. In business schools we study management for years and years, and a lot of it cannot really be put into practice for a practicing manager. A practicing manager should have the intuition, should have the ability, should have the desire to be a good manager. So I threw away all of those books. 9 books on economics. Well, economists have not been able to solve these serious economic problems, and a lot of them have views which are opposite one another. So I threw away all of those books as well. 5 books in marketing. Well, as far as I'm concerned, marketing is primarily on the question of manipulation. How can I entice people to buy something that they may not even need? And therefore that's the question of advertising and how best we can market a product and how best we can induce people to buy things that are ours and we think that we should sell them. I don't really like the idea in that context. So I threw away all of my marketing books. And so on. And then I said I kept my Shakespeare, my Bernard Shaw, my Voltaire, my Tolstoy, and my Tennessee Williams, plus Hafez, Rumi, Omar Khayyam, and Khalil Gibran's Prophet, and Arthur Miller's plays, and Hemingway's novels, and Plato's Republic, plus a few other love stories, and unforgettable movie tapes and classical music discs. Now I know that I'll be a better teacher. I will have something sensible to say, something that enriches the mind and the spirit and does not suffocate it. I'm now a real professor. Well, I'm retired, but now I feel that I'm ready to teach. So very shortly I'm going to introduce to you how in a condensed manner I can convey whatever I've learned during the 10 years of my college career and 30 years of teaching, and condense the classroom sessions of 1 hour and 15 minutes to perhaps 10 minutes, and provide it to you free of charge all across the globe. Abdu'l-Baha, the son of the Prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, in one of his tablets, he indicates that education without spiritual education is really inadequate. And all through my careers I've really desired to be able to intertwine what he calls spiritual education to the theme of education. And it doesn't have to relate to any religion, but in general terms. I hope that in this series that I'll be having, for every 10-15 minute session, I'll have 1 or 2 minutes of it would deal with the spiritual themes. And although I feel myself inadequate as a person, but I think that the spiritual themes would be relevant to all of us across the globe. Thank you for your attention.